Welcome to another Noble Rope Arts tutorial. My name is Noble, and today I'm going to show you 9 single column ties and when I use them. In bondage speak, a single column tie is any time wraps of the rope are taken around a column and tied off. A column can be an ankle, a wrist, a thigh, the torso, even the neck. Even 2 columns can be treated like a single column and bound with a single column tie. There must be hundreds of different single column ties that different riggers use at different times. Everyone has their favorites. I personally know and have learned at least a couple dozen. I've even invented some. But in practice, there are only about 9 that I use with any consistency whatsoever. That said, there's only really 2 that I use for about 90% of my time. The others I only use in special cases. And today I'll tell you a little bit about when I will use all of the different ties that I know and use consistently. What I suggest to new riggers is that they learn just a few very solid and efficient single column ties that will serve their purposes. Doesn't matter which ones they are as long as they're stable and you use them correctly. But if you only use a few, then you will get the movements for tying them into muscle memory far faster than trying to learn dozens and dozens of single column ties. Noble rope, the way I tie, is all about simplicity. So I try to tie as simply as possible and use the same techniques over and over again. That way I can concentrate on my partner and the way tying makes them feel rather than concentrating on the rope. The Somerville Bowline is what I believe should be a standard in every rigger's repertoire. The Somerville Bowline is not that difficult to tie once some practice is put in. It is very, very stable. It can be loaded from either the bite end or from the working parts or the running ends, and it will not collapse. It is elegant and it is beautiful. Its one drawback is that to be able to tie it very, very snugly, you have to slow down a little bit to get it tight. But with some practice, that can still be done. Well, the only other drawback this has is that under tension, it is almost impossible to untie this knot. That is also its beauty, in that under tension, it becomes more secure without any danger of collapse. But this does mean that if you want to untie it, what you need to do is break the tension in the working parts so that you can then open up and pull the bite undone. If I know that I need to be able to untie this easily without any fiddling, even if it's under tension, then I'm going to tie a variation of this knot called the Somerville Bowline with a draw loop. I'm just going to use excess bite when I tie this knot so that instead of taking the bite all the way through at the finish, I only take a bite of the bite through. And this forms a draw loop so that I have a tail that I can pull when I want to release this knot. If I am tying someone's wrist together behind their back for the beginning of a box tie, this is my preferred knot, a Somerville Bowline with a draw loop. The reason for that is if their shoulders start to become stressed or there are any warning signs of nerve impingement, I can untie their wrists readily without any fiddling around. Reef knot on a coil. If I want a knot that is fun to tie and smooth and elegant, and I know that it does not have to be bomb-proof, this is the knot that I'm going to tie. It is fun to tie. It's very easy to get the proper amount of tension you want, and it seats down. Properly seated and used correctly, this is a wonderful knot. However, remember, if this is not seated properly and under intermittent tension, this can pop and become a slip knot, and that is very dangerous. But again, if I know that I'm not going to load the knot a great deal or that I'm going to come back to the bite, which will lock it off and make it so it can't collapse, this is a wonderful knot, and I use it a great deal just because it can be tied with tension at all times. The Yuki knot. The Yuki knot is the knot I go to if I really want a traditional Japanese shibari look, because this granny knot on a coil is the single column tie that the majority of Japanese masters use when they tie shibari. I tie in the over-under fashion. It is essential that this knot be seated very well because as a granny knot, it is very prone to collapse. I have a tutorial on an alternative method of tying an over-under Yuki knot that is less prone to collapse. Another way of making this knot more secure is to tie what is called a bula bula by taking a half hitch around the working part. This stabilizes the knot. However, this is still quite prone to loosening under intermittent load. My preference, if I need to stabilize this, is to put in what I call an undertow by passing the bite underneath the wraps and up through the loop it creates. The undertow will not come untied and is just as secure as a Somerville Bowline. If I need a knot that does not have a bite and locks off so it is impossible to be untied at the knot, I can use a reverse tension with a half hitch lock off. This is tied by passing the running ends through the bite and doing a reverse tension. Coming back around, going through the new lark's head, and then locking this off with a half hitch. This cannot be untied, and it is very, very secure. However, notice that it requires a lot of pull-throughs to be done. One shortcut you can use is to merely form your first reverse tension by creating a lark's head and then dropping that over your column and then doing your reverse tension. Do you need a super fast quick release on a single column tie? Sometimes I do in stage work. My go-to knot in that case is a bolted single column tie. If I want to make sure that there's no torque on the bolt, I can take one of these and put a half hitch around the other side. This comes off in a flash when the bolt is pulled out. I always keep a few of these pegs with me whenever I tie. They're very, very handy for a variety of things. If you need to tie someone to a cross for a flogging or a whipping, or if you want to tie someone's wrists above their head to a hard point, there's always the concern of the single column tie pressing up against the impingement points on either side of the wrist. My solution to this is something that I call an impact cuff. What you're going to do is tie your single column tie of choice around the wrist. Notice again that this wants to pull into these impingement points under tension, and especially if someone is so absorbed in the flogging or whipping that they start to sink into this, this can cut off circulation and press on those nerves. My solution is to tie a marlin spike. That's an overhand knot past the palm. Just bring a bite up through and drop a peg through it. This gives someone something to hold on to. Notice that now I can pull on this, but there is slack still in this line, reducing the pressure on the impingement points. If I really want to give someone some purchase, I can use a far larger piece of bamboo or a piece of dowel. Again, the line goes between these two fingers, holds on like this, and again, the slack is maintained here. That's Noble's impact cuff. When I tie an ankle in a single column tie where I know that the direction of pull is going to be away from the foot, I always want to make sure that I tie with enough looseness so that the knot will not ride on the ankle bone when it is loaded. I don't want this so loose that it can slip off of the heel, but I still want this to be nice and smooth. Some people like the pull on the inside of the ankle. Some people like the pull on the outside. However, for very, very severe pulls or people who have sensitive ankles, this can still put an awful lot of pressure on the ankle bone. In that situation, I will use my modification of Jack L. Frank's gravity boot. My way of tying it is a little bit different, but it follows the same concept of being able to put pressure on the instep rather than just around the ankle bones. Put the center bite on the toe, I wrap around the bottom of the foot, then around the ankle. I continue moving down the foot. Unlike Jack, I do not put any weaves in at this point. I continue until I have 3 sets of wraps that go around the foot. I don't do any weaves until I reach this point, in which case I'm going to pass over these two and under this. This is the only weave that I do on this tie. And again, this comes back underneath the foot. When I get to this point, I'm going to take my placeholder off the big toe and bring this back around. The way I finish this off now is to tie a Somerville Bowline at the bottom of the foot. This is different than the way other people tie it. However, this is far more secure. It allows you to put just the right amount of tension here at the bottom. This is far easier to tie on another person than it is to tie on yourself. This is my version of a gravity boot. And again, with the direction of pull this way, this puts far less tension on the ankle bone because it puts some of the tension into the instep. There are a couple single column ties that I do not use in my work, and one is the Hojojitsu cuff of a simple lark's head. This is great for takedown scenes, but as more pull is put on this, the tighter it becomes. And this is just not the kind of work that I do. If you do this kind of work, it's because you are both consenting to the risks of having this crush the tissue that is underneath it while you play. The other tie that I avoid is 2 half hitches. The reason for that is pretty simple, because it is, like the lark's head, a slip knot, and it will become tighter and tighter. These are shortcuts that people will take when they are in a hurry to bind a wrist, but with practice, these ties do not require more than 10 or 20 seconds to tie efficiently and smoothly, and with practice, they can be done in 6 to 8 seconds, other than the gravity boot. So there's no reason to do the shortcuts. Learn these ties, tie them properly and smoothly, and you will be repaid generously. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. That's 9 single column ties and when I use them. If you'd like details about how to tie these with hand movements, I have detailed tutorials on some of these individual single column ties. That's about it. Have fun with this. Play safe. And remember, it's not about the rope. It's about connecting with your partner. I'll see you next time.